Welcome back to 52 Lockup. I am your Apple Teeny Cadma, a bit in Apple TV. 52 Lockup is a series I started to talk about one of my biggest passions, true crime. A new episode on every Cadmaniac Monday for 52 Mondays, 52 crimes. So, hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to like, comment, feedback, give me something, and subscribe, of course. And obviously, viewer discretion is always advised. So today's story starts in the summer of 1993, actually. Let me actually get a little closer. So it starts in the village of Savona in central Steuben County. Now we have Doreen and Dale Robie. I hope that's how you pronounce the last name, because it might be Robie. But I saw a different pronunciation, so I'm going to go with Robie. Apologize, please forgive me. But Doreen and Dale live there with their two children, with Derrick being their oldest of the two. And unfortunately, during that summer, Derrick would be attending his, recreation program, summer camp kind of thing at a park that was near the home in Savona, New York. Now, Doreen would watch Derrick every day. She would watch him make the short trip to the program at the park. But on August 2nd, 1993, Doreen's hands were a little full with his younger brother. Now, Derrick is at 4 years old. So he, very proudly tells his mom, it's okay, Mom. I'll go by myself. Just to give you some kind of idea of how young the younger other child was, at least under the age of 4. It was the first time that Derrick would be walking alone, to the program without her supervision. It's the first time. She had never done that before. And unfortunately, it would be the last time. He was packed and ready with his lunch, and he had a banana and some Kool-Aid, and Derrick kisses his mom and says, I love you, and he makes his way. So let's introduce now Eric Smith, who's now 13 years old in the same summer of 1993. He grew up, from what I found, in an abusive home environment and frequently was bullied by his classmates. He would say later on that it was for his ears, his glasses, for being too short, his red hair. He would say pretty much all of those things. So August 2nd, 1993, Eric Smith would say, in hindsight, he was tired of being hurt and wanted to be the one to do the hurting. So Eric was riding his bike, through the area, and he's just doing his thing. And then he spots Derrick walking up the road towards his summer camp. But he sees him across the street. And spontaneously, Eric has a very cruel idea. So he lures Derrick over into a very wooded area, and he promises him, hey, listen, this is a shortcut to get to your camp. I know what I'm talking about. And Derrick trusting him because he's a bigger kid, right? So after they're alone, Eric jumps on top of Derrick, begins strangling him. He eventually beat Derrick to death with rocks. He even smashed a banana near his body and poured Derrick's Kool-Aid into his wounds. After Derrick had left, his mother, Doreen, said she had noticed that clouds began to appear in the sky. And it started to rain, which kind of left her with a very dreadful feeling. She began to prep to go pick him up from the program at the park. And when she's about to go pick him up, she learns he never showed up. So she immediately reports him missing. Bam. She does not know already that her son is already dead, right? So nearly 5 hours later, searchers find Derrick's body in the small patch of woods near the park. They found the banana that was smashed near his body and had realized also that Kool-Aid was poured into his wounds. Immediately, everyone was like, it's an adult. It has to be an adult. And they preemptively assumed that it would be someone who was not from their town. It's got to be an out-of-towner. It's got to be an adult. It had to be a stranger in their eyes. And due to this fear, the town's fear just skyrocketed. People started keeping their kids indoors. They're like, oh my God, what is happening? What is happening? They wanted to know who was the killer, who swooped through our town and did it. So while the police are conducting interviews, they come across Eric Smith. And he initially tells the investigators, I was riding my bike when I saw Derrick across the street. Investigators' attention, right? So He states that the encounter that he saw them at was like, oh yeah, I saw him by those patch of woods over there. Of course, it's where Derrick's body is found, right? And when he asked for the time, it's around the time he was murdered, right? So investigators decide to bring Eric Smith, like, to the location because they're like, well, can you reenact what happened or what you saw? So on August 6th, investigators were walking him through the reenactment. They're recording him. They got everything down. And Eric would go into very accurate details about, like, Derrick's t-shirt, Derrick's lunch bag. I mean, Eric was providing the kind of details that made investigators go, this kid knows more than what he's saying, right? So 2 days later, on August 8th, Eric Smith would actually confess to his mother, stating, and I quote, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I killed that little boy." So Eric Smith's grandfather remembered that moment of his grandson saying this after the family had begged him, please tell the officers what you saw when Derrick, went missing. And obviously everyone really thought like this kid saw something, but he's scared to say it. You know what I mean? Like that's where they were going. He would later confess to law enforcement about the murder. It would be noted later by investigator John Hibsch, I hope that's how you pronounce it, I apologize, that Eric seemed to enjoy talking about the murder. So, on September 2nd of 1993, a grand jury indicts Eric Smith on a second-degree murder charge. And although he was 13 at the time, he would be tried as an adult. By September 10th, 1993, Eric would plead not guilty. Actually, he would plead guilty to second-degree murder charge. This case, of course, caught national news. I apologize. In August 1994, Eric faced a jury while his defense attorney argued that Eric suffers from a mental disease that can be characterized as a rage disorder and could not be criminally responsible, right? During the trial, there were testimonies that revealed Smith had speech problems and a long history of throwing temper tantrums, apparently since he was a toddler, which is kind of hard for me to gauge because I feel like toddlers just do that in general. Like toddlers just wake up and choose violence. But they would learn that Eric was relentlessly bullied and he was held back in school, and the prosecutors pushed back against the insanity defense, arguing that Smith was well aware of what he was doing and should be held responsible rather, for his actions under the law. Now, the trial ends on August 16th, 1994, and only after a few hours of deliberation of the jury reached a verdict late at night stating that Eric Smith is guilty of second-degree murder for the slaying of Derrick Robie. The jury agreed that with the prosecutor saying that Eric was not suffering from any like extreme mental disorder, but rather he had full control of his actions at the time of the murder. On June 11th, 2002, Eric has his first opportunity to apply for parole. He goes in there and he's his first time. He's like, parole. He's 22 years old now. Remember, he went in when he was like 13, 14. Now he's 22. They noticed he didn't have any remorse for murdering Derrick. And they were like, nah, go back. And with this being open to him, that means now every 2 years he can now reapply to the parole board, which he literally did almost like to the day, June 8th, 2004. Eric Smith is now 24 years old. He was denied parole a second time. This is the year apparently Eric Smith decided to read a statement to the television show 48 Hours while he was in prison. Eric apologized and stated that he recognized that his actions caused a terrible loss in the Robie family. Even goes on to discuss his experiences being bullied as a child and what caused him to shut down his feelings. Why do I get the hiccups? I'm sorry. Eric believed, that the verbal abuse that he encountered in life is what led him to take his emotional rage out on someone who has nothing to do with it. So, Eric Smith also told the board that he had a good feeling while he was strangling Derrick at the time. because instead of him being the person who was being hurt, he was now in the position of power to hurt somebody else. He apparently even admitted at this time that if he was not charged in 1993, that he definitely probably would have killed again, which only confirms signs that Eric Smith was basically the seed or the budding of a serial killer, right? So his parole was denied again in 2004. December 2009, prior to Eric Smith's parole hearing in 2010, Eric was interviewed by CBS, where he stated that his anger at the time was never directed at Derrick. Even though he took it out on Derrick, it was never directed towards him. He explained that his anger was directed at the type of boys who used to tease him and began to consistently express remorse for his actions. Eric Smith states, if I can switch places with him and take the grave for him to live, I do it in a second. However, after this moment, the parole board would deny him again. Now we're all the way up to October 5th, 2021. Eric appears to the parole board for the 11th time, where he tells the parole board, listen, I want to obtain a college education. I plan on working in electrical installation or carpentry, which apparently he has certificates from, because you can get that kind of stuff in prison. He also explained that he was engaged and that his fiance was studying to be a lawyer and had written him about the juvenile justice system, and eventually over time that's how they fell in love with each other. I don't have the name of the fiance, but I do wonder about her and if she has if she is a passive hybristophiliac. Now, for those of you who may not know, hybristophilia is actually when a person has a sexual interest, love interest, or an attraction to those who commit crimes. Now, a passive hybristophiliac will not participate in crimes. An aggressive one will be like, babe, I think we can do this. So, often hybristophilia is associated with women, but me being curious, I did a beginner survey before. Just one time. I'm not a pro. But I only allowed people to say their gender, basically, and the age group that they felt like they belonged in. And there were just as many men as there were women who were attracted to a person who had committed a crime, which was interesting. The only difference I found that the women were more likely to engage in a relationship with a man in prison, opposed to the man engaging within a relationship with a woman who's in prison. Now, what's interesting is that most of the women who answered my questions engaged with the man in prison as a form of regaining control. They did not have in their life, right? So because for them it was safer to them dating someone in prison than it was dating a man in real life. And then there was a smaller, the smallest percentage was those who felt like they fell in love and changed them. And it's quite fascinating. It's very fascinating. And perhaps there's reasons why men do not participate in engaging with women who are in prison, because maybe due to the patriarchy, if you will, men do not have to obtain power from women. They don't have to feel traditionally unsafe around women. Just food for thought and curiosity. But I digress. I'm getting way off topic. So by October 7th, 2021, Eric would finally be granted his parole. And they based their decision on a benefactor, the fact that he had a clean disciplinary record for the last 10 years, as well as a strong release plan. He had the lower scores on his risk assessment to society. But as soon as people got wind of this parole board's decision in March, they were out there with a candlelight. They marched and they had a vigil held in Savona for Derrick. There were community members that peacefully protested it against his release, while trying to make sure that Derrick's life was well remembered, as well as how he went out. Many of the members of the community were terrified that he would move back in with his mother. They did not want him in that town. He would actually be released this year, February 1st, 2022, from Woodbourne Correctional Facility after finding approved housing for him to live in. He currently resides in Queens, New York. Apparently, Eric Smith will remain on parole for the rest of his life. He's 42 right now. And although he he is released, he's still under a lot of restrictions. Like, he cannot leave New York State without permission. He must have regular contact with his parole officer. He cannot associate with others who are known to be engaging in like illegal activity. And I mean, and that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the restrictions that are laid upon Eric Smith. Like, they are not playing like, we're letting you out, fuck this up. Like, that's literally how the rules are set up for him. Like, they're intensely watching him. But I'm curious though, like, what do you guys think? Like, what are your thoughts about the juvenile justice system? Do you think a child who commits murder is capable of being fully rehabilitated to be a productive citizen in society? And what is your perception of the American rehabilitation programs? Do you find that they are actually benefiting to the person as well as to society? I mean, according to healthypeople.gov, the U.S. releases over 7 million people from jail and more than 600,000 people from prison each year, right? However, the recidivism rates are still high. So within like 3 years, according to their website, I'm quoting, keep in mind, within 3 years of a person's release, 2 out of 3 people will be rearrested, and more than 50% of those will be incarcerated again. Now, with large numbers like that, you can't help but to question, like, why are these people committing the crime again? Is it because when they were released, they did not have a real steady plan? Is it because they are limited once they are released back into society in regards to like work, employment, any kind of means to make money? Is it because while in prison they are treated very differently or like extremely poorly opposed to maybe other systems like in Norway? Do you think America is capable of adjusting their judicial system that would actually benefit the individual who ends up in prison as well as the society when they are released? I mean, there's like 1,000 things that can go through your mind when you think about this, because you're just like, it's generally not normal for kids to just go, especially commit murder. So I find it to be very relatively interesting, but it's just so hard to do these cases because there's limited information to protect the juvenile. However, the other things I was very curious about, but I could not find much detail about, was what was the abuse he was enduring at home? Like, what was happening at home? I mean, his juvenile case made, obviously, like I said, things were difficult to obtain information, but I didn't see anyone talking about what was happening in his home. They just said, oh, he came from an abusive home. But what was happening in there? I mean, sometimes when I see these cases of like a child committing murder or a horrific crime, my immediate thoughts are, what is happening where they live? Are we not protecting them? Are we not like helping them? Like, what is happening? And are there signs that are being ignored? And that's what led to this moment, for a child to actually commit something, when generally most children are not really there for that kind of thing. And just as a side note for those who are curious about their about Derrick's parents, they have not really made much of a comment about his release. They simply kind of just don't want nothing. They don't want anything to like do with him. And quite frankly, I can't really blame them. But it is fascinating, because when you look at the juvenile justice system, you're kind of just like, okay, did you guys really fix him? Or why did it take so long for him to actually feel the remorse? And he's going to be heavily watched, and I think it's probably why it's a little easier for him to move into Queens or something like that, because in the city it's a little easier to hide, if you will. My other, did we fail him as a society by not helping him, and could that in the long run have saved Derrick's life if someone had paid more attention, if someone had reported something? And I really wish they elaborated more about the abuse that was going on at home, because especially for the grandfather to say like, oh, I remember when he said this moment, blah, 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 to his mother. But then I'm like, were you a witness to the abuse? Did you step in? Did you not know about the abuse? Like, it left me with so many questions. A lot of the times when kids are getting into trouble and they're getting into like, petty crimes to serious crimes, it's a cry for help. I mean, boys will get arrested for things that are more serious opposed to something like petty, because it seems like, boys will be boys. Girls will get arrested primarily because they broke a rule like curfew. And if you do that one too many times, they'll start to ship you out. Your record changes and your treatment changes. Like, everything changes. So where are we failing as a society that Eric Smith didn't get the help that he needed if he was in an abuseful upbringing. And if he was being severely abused or bullied in school, no one said anything. I couldn't find like what I wanted to find in regards to like articles and information about that, because I had so many questions. Like, where did we fail Eric Smith in the long run when we could have saved Derrick's life long before this had even become, that moment? But that's just me rambling on. I would love to hear your feedback. But yes, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate those who are watching. I'm actually very surprised to see people are like, hi, and I'm like, oh snap, hi, other weirdos. But yes, thank you so much, and I will stand up to give you guys a proper adieu. Sorry, the juice is really good. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. Please, again, I remind you, give me feedback, like, comment, something. I'm still trying to figure out, I guess, my method and how I want to do things. So, like, getting feedback is the most valuable thing that I could possibly give. And I'll see you guys next week.